You ever have one of those days? You know the one. A crazy deadline, an inbox that just won't quit, and by the time you finally get home, intimacy is literally the last thing on your mind. It's a feeling we all get. But the why behind it, the actual science of how a stressed out brain can completely shut down the body, is absolutely fascinating. So let's get into it.
Here's our game plan. We're going to start with that common feeling we all know. Then we'll dive into the biology, what's really going on inside your body. From there, we'll explore the mind's critical role, zoom out to see how culture and gender play a part, and then finally, we'll look at how all this stress stuff plays out between partners. All right, so let's start right there, with that feeling we all know so well, and a question that, let's be honest, most of us have probably asked ourselves. It seems so simple, doesn't it? You're just tired or distracted, but the real answer is so much deeper. It involves this incredible, intricate battle happening inside your body, a tug of war between two powerful and competing systems. To really get it, we've got to look at our own biology. So let's talk about that biological battle. I want you to think of your body as having two major operating modes. And here's the catch. They can't both be running at full power at the same time. One is all about surviving the next 5 minutes, and the other, it's about surviving for the next generation. On one side, you've got your survival mode. This is your fight or flight response. When you're stressed, it floods your system with hormones like cortisol to get you ready to either fight a threat or run away from it. And on the other side is procreation mode, which handles everything to do with reproduction. Now here's the crucial part. When survival mode is on, procreation mode gets shut down. Your body just can't prioritize making babies when it thinks it's running from a tiger. It's one or the other. And what's so wild is just how systematic this shutdown is. When you have all that cortisol from chronic stress, it basically wages a coordinated attack on your reproductive system, top to bottom. It tells your brain's hypothalamus to stop making the starting gun hormone. That in turn makes the pituitary glands less responsive, so it releases fewer of the key hormones for sexual function. And to top it all off, stress directly tells the testes and ovaries to pump the brakes on producing testosterone and estrogen, the very hormones that fuel our sex drive in the first place. And this isn't just some invisible chemical thing. This biological battle has very real, very physical consequences. Chronic stress can cause the muscles in the pelvic floor to clench up and tighten. That can lead to pain during sex or even muscle spasms. It can even throw off the delicate balance of the vaginal microbiome. It's all connected. But okay, it's not just about hormones and muscles. We all know it goes deeper than that. Our brain, which is arguably the most important sex organ we have, is also getting completely hijacked by stress. So let's look at how that psychological battle goes down. From a psychological angle, stress fights a war on 3 fronts. First, you've got simple cognitive distraction. Your brain is so busy replaying that meeting or worrying about bills that it literally doesn't have the mental space to even notice or process sexual cues. Then there's performance anxiety. This is that fear of failure that puts you in spectator mode, where you're watching yourself and judging, instead of just being in the moment. And of course, that just creates a vicious cycle. And finally, if stress tips over into depression, you can get something called anhedonia, the actual inability to feel pleasure, which, as you can imagine, just kills desire right at the source. So this all seems pretty clear-cut, right? Stress is bad for sex. Case closed. But what if I told you that under some very specific, very weird circumstances, the leftover buzz from a stressful or even scary event could actually make you feel more attracted to someone? It sounds completely backwards, I know, but there's a fascinating theory that explains it. It's called excitation transfer theory, and the main idea is pretty simple. That physical arousal you get from an event, like, say, fear, it doesn't just switch off like a light. It lingers in your body. It decays slowly. And if a new emotional event happens before that physical buzz has faded away, your brain can accidentally blame all that leftover energy on the new feeling. And here's exactly how that handoff works. Imagine you just watched a terrifying horror movie. Your heart is pounding, right? The movie ends, but your body is still humming with adrenaline. Then you turn to look at your partner. Your brain, feeling your racing heart, looks for a reason. And it misattributes all that leftover fear arousal as intense romantic or sexual attraction. It's like a physiological mix-up, handing off the energy from fear and turning it into passion. Wild, right? Okay, so we've looked at our bodies and our minds, but none of us exist in a vacuum, right? Our experiences with all this stuff are shaped by the bigger world around us, and that includes our gender and our culture. When you dig into the research, one pattern shows up over and over again.
On average, women report a much steeper drop in sexual desire when they're feeling stressed out compared to men. And that difference suggests there might be some different kind of default stress response patterns going on. And those patterns are often talked about as fight or flight versus tend and befriend. Now, the classic fight or flight response is more associated with men, who might pull away, get angry, or even use sex as a way to relieve stress. The tend and befriend response, on the other hand, is more commonly seen in women, who are more likely to want to connect and seek support. And for them, desire is often deeply tied to feeling that emotional closeness, which is something stress makes really, really hard to achieve. And then you have to layer culture on top of all of this, because culture itself can be a massive source of stress. This quote from Catherine S.K. Hall really puts it perfectly. She says, "The belief that female sexual pleasure is dangerous, undesirable, or irrelevant may contribute to the high global prevalence of sexual dissatisfaction." So you see, sometimes the stressor isn't just a bad day at work, it can be woven into the very fabric of a society. So let's bring this all back home to the couple. Because stress isn't something that just happens to one person in a vacuum. It's a dynamic, powerful force that lives and breathes within a relationship. There's a perfect term for this, the spillover effect. And it's exactly what it sounds like. The stress from your job doesn't just clock out when you do. It comes home with you, and it spills over into your conversations, your mood, and ultimately it can erode the intimacy you share with your partner. But this is where it gets really complicated and honestly kind of surprising. You would think that if both people in a couple are super stressed, their sex life would be non-existent, right? Well, one study found the opposite. Sometimes when both partners have similarly high stress levels, they actually report more sexual activity. It's possible that being in it together creates this sort of shared coping mechanism. The real problem, it seems, is when those stress levels are mismatched. If one person is completely overwhelmed and the other is just fine, the stressed partner's low desire often becomes the defining reality for the couple. It tends to drag down the whole dynamic and can really create distance in the relationship. So when you put it all together, you realize that stress isn't just an internal feeling. It's an active force. It rewires our biology, it hijacks our psychology, and it reshapes our most intimate relationships. Which really leads us to one final big question to think about. Is stress the invisible third partner in your relationship?